everyone! Welcome back to another Whispers of the Wilds. Today we're diving into one of the creepiest legends from North American folklore, the Wendigo. The Wendigo has been represented in media and books since it was first written about by the French Jesuit missionary Paul Le Jeune. Hopefully I'm pronouncing all of that correctly. His 1636 report documented a warning about a creature which he called an achin, a variation of the word Watico? I don't know. That had been preying on members of a local indigenous community in what is now Quebec. It's a creature that shows up in a lot of Algonquin stories, and it's actually more than just a monster. It's a warning about what happens when people get too greedy, too selfish, or too hungry for the wrong things. And the consequences are of disregard for one's own humanity. While Paul Le Jeune provides the earliest Western account of the Wendigo, his report isn't where the stories of the creature originate. The Wendigo, or Widjigo, as it's called in Algonquin, comes from the stories of several indigenous nations across the northern U.S. and Canada, like the Cree, Ojibwe, and Innu. Stories of the creature likely originated from the harsh winters that the tribes had to face. During these cold months, game was scarce and starvation was frequent. Some would become so desperate that they would turn to the unthinkable act of cannibalism. And it is from these unfortunate souls where the cautionary tales of the Wendigo were born. In those tales, the Wendigo isn't just a scary forest monster. It's not some boogeyman created to scare children or keep them from wandering into the forest. It's to instill in them the virtue of human dignity. It's a terrible tale of what a person becomes when they give in to things like cannibalism, greed, or gluttony. Basically, when you put your own survival above the community and betray that trust, it allows a malignant spirit to take hold of you and transform you into something else entirely. You shed your humanity for primal bloodlust and instinct. You're no longer in control of you or what you've become. And what does that look like? There's many variations of the creature, but like a game of telephone, it changes and mutates with each retelling. We can't be certain of what the monster truly looks like. Maybe it's too evil to be described. But there remains a common theme among all forms. Chilling, sunken eyes that are like dark pits of tar. A humanoid face with ashy gray skin pulled taut against a protruding skull and rows of front-facing, sharp teeth. Some describe the skull as neither human or animal, but something that is mixed between them. Some stories tell of the creature having massive antlers, while others omit this detail. The sight of the creature isn't the only foul thing about it either. Perhaps the most disgusting and distinguishing trait is the overwhelming smell of rotten flesh. A sickly, sweet pungency that precludes its appearance. The worst, creepiest detail? Every time it eats, it grows in size, so it's never full. It just keeps consuming, and it can never be satisfied. Which I suppose makes sense for a creature born of greed and gluttony. Now that we've learned a bit about the Wendigo, it's time for a short story. Long, long ago, at a time when the world was dark and vast, there was a small tribe that lived in the northernmost woods of Canada. Winter had crept into the land, and snow lay deep across the northern forests. Two brothers, Nanook and Toklo, had set out on an expedition to track elk in a valley that no one from their tribe had yet explored. Nanook, the stronger, older brother, was admired for his bravery. He was loved and respected in the tribe. The younger brother, Toklo, followed closely, his eyes often shadowed with envy, though he kept his demeanor polite. Days passed, and the valley grew stranger and wilder with each step. The trees rose thick and twisted, the wind howling and carrying a bitter edge. Though the brothers laid many traps, they were never successful in catching anything, not even fish beneath the frozen rivers. Hunger would inevitably begin to gnaw at them, but Nanook encouraged them to press on, determined to keep them alive. Toklo, however, grew restless. At first, he muttered complaints, then whispered arguments. He claimed that Nanook's pride would get them lost and killed. Night fell again for what felt like the 100th time, and with it, of course, the temperature. As their fire shrank to embers, Toklo began to stare at his brother with a new look in his eyes, something sharp, calculating, and evil. His inner voice was cut off by a gravely hiss, a noise like buzzing that somehow echoed words.
Were he not so arrogant, you could be enjoying a warm fire and a nice meal. He believes himself better than you in all ways. That's why he won't listen to your suggestions.
Toklo began muttering to himself, attempting but failing to rationalize his thoughts. Nanook let out a long, frustrated sigh as he could quite visibly see the lifelessness taking over his younger brother's eyes. Hunger and exhaustion was wearing down their minds, and even he was starting to lose hope. Nonetheless, Nanook closed his eyes and tried to get sleep in this frozen prison of a cave they had found. He was violently rattled awake when Toklo suddenly went into a frenzy.
"This is all your fault!"
Toklo screamed, his eyes wide and bloodshot. There was a wildness to him in this moment that Nanook had never seen before. Before he could try and fight back, a sharp pain radiated from his shoulder, followed by a feeling of warmth rushing over his skin, which turned out to be blood. He looked in horror at his young brother, who was now chewing and consuming the flesh which had just been torn off. Toklo swallowed, experiencing a brief satiety that was quickly replaced with more desperation. He tore into his brother's flesh, again ignoring the gut-wrenching shriek, fixated on simply just achieving that feeling of satisfaction. Again, until Nanook's body fell limp and silent. Greed, envy, resentment. Toklo no longer resisted these monstrosities. Black, hollowed eyes stared down at the desecrated corpse that lay among his now elongated and clawed fingers. The creature's head reared, sharp, pointed teeth tearing into and consuming the rest of what it desired. Not just relief from starvation, but his brother's power and fame. Now it was his. But the Wendigo wanted more. More and more. It would stumble through the valley, hunting and slaughtering countless others. But it would never be enough. It was an insufferable, never-ending hunger. From the distant ridges of the valley, the wind carried a whisper, a warning to all who entered. The Wendigo is not merely born from starvation of body, but of spirit. It is born from envy, from selfishness, from the consuming acid that grows in the heart when one cannot bear the happiness of another. The young brother had become the embodiment of this hunger, forever wandering the forests, feeding what he could never satisfy. Greed.